Your lordship, a messenger has come bearing the royal seal. Baron Galagan's pen froze. His eyes darted about before coming to rest on the calendar on his right. Surely not, he muttered under his breath. Beside today's date was a small red cross. It seemed to be too much of a coincidence. He let his gaze drift to the family portrait on the wall, painted back in the spring when his son celebrated his... My lord, the messenger? The servant interrupted his short-lived reverie. Baron Galagan returned his pen to its case and forcefully stood up, as if trying to mimic the stateliness of a higher noble. Bring him here. He paused. And prepare some light refreshments for the messenger. It was quickly evident to Baron Galagan that this was no simple messenger. Even for a bearer of a royal command, he was too properly dressed. His clothes were rather neat, bereft of obvious patches of dust and dirt typical of most simple messengers. He stood tall and walked with a confidence uncommon amongst the common folk, or at least uncommon when faced with a noble. Most striking of all was the sword on his hip. While the scabbard seemed unmarked and otherwise plain, the sword itself was clearly of outstanding quality. After all, no ordinary swordsman would have a pommel made of inscribed jet. Such details, however, did not escape the Baron's eyes. His father's blade, too, was tipped with this very gemstone. The Crown Prince's entourage will be arriving within an hour, Baron Galagan. The messenger stood before the Baron in his humble study, refusing to say anything more. A gentle knocking on the door broke the silence, followed by the shuffling of feet as a servant made their way to the table with a tray of tea and simple biscuits. The Baron's gaze swept across the messenger's face, and he swore he caught a hint of a smile. The servant began laying down the silverware only to be interrupted by the Baron. With a raised hand, he gestured for the servant to leave. The Baron leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, watching the servant gingerly slip out of the study. As I was saying, His Highness's entourage will be arriving within an hour, as part of his post-war tour of the country. Baron Galagan turned his focus to the messenger. Another pregnant pause, accented by a small grin creeping onto the messenger's face. Then, with the wave of his hand, the illusion dissipated. But the prince is already here, said Prince Acmeon. There was a frantic knocking on the door. Your lordship, are you all right? The servant exclaimed. Yes, David, I just tripped. Carry on with your duties. David thought to himself, How did he trip while sitting down? A missive from Crown Prince Acmeon to the court. Count Angra was found trafficking narcotics, necromantic reagents, and demonic texts. By the powers vested in me by His Majesty Argos Panoptus III, Count Angra and its family are stripped of their nobility and titles, and will be subject to trial in the capital. For his assistance in uncovering these foul acts, Baron Galagan will administer the Angron County until further notice. His Royal Highness, Crown Prince Acmeon Panoptus. Dear Father, I have discovered a couple more traitorous rats, but I believe this display and fear will keep them in line. Meanwhile, do you still have Obdura's root in your garden? Your son, Acmeon. My dear son, excellent. And yes, I do. Help yourself. Your old man.